Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Hobby Cheating Q&A live. This is where, for the next hour, we all sit here and you put your hobby-related questions in the comments, and I do my best to answer them. So over on one of these two sides of the screen, depending on how you're looking, I don't know which side it's on, there's a comments box. You can leave comments there and ask your hobby questions, and I do my best to answer them. So should be a lot of fun. We'll do this for about an hour. We try to do this once every month, at least, usually in the middle of the month. In this case, it happens to fall on the 17th. So that's kind of the middle. Hello, everybody. Very good to see everyone. I hope you're all doing well today. I hope everybody's been spending their Saturday fighting the war against the gray and getting a lot of paint on models. I myself have been trying to put the finishing touches on this girl here from Celestial Miniatures. So she's coming along. Hopefully should finish her up today. And, but I want to know what your questions are. So drop those questions over in the comments and we will get them answered. So everybody knows that you will be probably watching this as the new hobby cheating video actually publishes as well. It'll go up at 2 o'clock today. So there you go. And today's is all about varnish. So it's a deep dive on specifically, or sorry, not varnish. I'm lying. Forget that. There's a different schedule. Today's is all about masking. Working on too many videos at once. Today's is all about masking. So there you go. Okay. So we got some questions rolling in. Let's give some answers here. If I'm looking over this direction, it's because that's where my monitor is with the questions. It's not that I'm trying to be rude. All right. Bento-san, when painting with Vallejo metal color paints, do you have any tips for getting super bright steel highlights? Yeah, use silver. That's it. Just use the silver. This one. I've had to replace 2 bottles of this. I have like the whole set, all like 16. And in the entirety of my owning it, and I use this a lot. I've only had to replace 2 bottles ever where I actually got to the bottom of it. And that was basic steel and silver. So there you go. I have a new product coming that is supposed to be the brightest, most pure, true metallic silver sheen around in acrylics. So we're going to give that a test this week and we'll see how that works. So stay tuned. Crazy Horse, why is there still unpainted terrain on that table? He means this stuff right here. Because I don't know what I want to use it for yet. That's the answer. I don't know if it's going to be a base or terrain on my table. I haven't decided. Look, this thing got painted, okay? And that's the important part. All right. Alexander, I'd love to get into airbrushing, but I don't have a dedicated hobby room. I discussed on the PMP about dangers for health and problems like color dust, but I'm still undetermined. Okay, so look, I airbrush. You need a space that's about 3 feet by 3 feet, like a child's desk. Is the amount of space you need to set up your airbrush. I use a mobile airbrush booth. It sits right over here on my left. I'm in a basement office. You can tell. I mean, that's a basement window. There is 0 ventilation in this room. Okay. Now, when I airbrush, I use like a little fold-out booth. It has a fan in the back with a filter. I run that air filter. It just blows the air right out the back. It's not going anywhere. It's not venting anywhere. I don't spray anything but acrylic paints down here. So no enamels, no toxic paints, no stuff like that. I've heard a lot of people talk about like color dust or whatever. I've never had this problem. I airbrush a lot. You can wear a mask. I sometimes do. I sometimes don't. I do always run the fan. It seems to be fine. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I haven't done a large enough statistical analysis, but I can tell you I've been airbrushing out of that booth pretty regularly for 4 years, always with the fan on, often with a mask on, and never had any problems. I don't ever cough up colored paint or any silly thing like that. Now, some people are hypersensitive to that stuff, like to paint in general. I mean, acrylic paint is non-toxic. That doesn't mean you should eat it or breathe it. It just means that in general, it's non-toxic. So like, my general advice would be to use the standard precautions, but you need about a 3 foot by 3 foot space to set up an airbrush. That's it. So if you can find somewhere in your house where you can have a little kid's desk you have enough room to airbrush. There you go. Okay. Okay. Matthias says, is the video working for you guys? Hopefully. Hopefully you're all actually watching this. It says I'm live and it says everybody's watching. So I assume you're all hearing my answers. Hopefully so. Okay, good. Yes, because Alexander responded to my question. I see your follow-up, Alexander. What about thinner and stuff? Yeah, it's fine. I mean, thinners are still just acrylic additives. Most of them aren't toxic in any way, as long as you're talking about like a glaze medium or a flow improver or something like that. Where you get into danger is when you start spraying non-acrylic paint. You start spraying enamels and other types of things that are legitimately toxic. Then you have to have really proper ventilation. You've got to get the air out of the room. You've got to have really like proper masks and stuff like that. I wouldn't recommend spraying that stuff in an enclosed space. It is awful, like truly awful, and it will screw you up. So don't do that. But like additives and stuff is fine. Okay. Chris Smith, why haven't you made a Slanesh Arachnarok conversion? Because I hate spiders and will never touch anything spider related. Simple enough. How would you do an old school, Bidoof Sama, how would you do an old school non-metallic metal? I don't know what you mean by that. I don't know what you mean by old school. Give me some more definition on that. I mean, I do non-metallic metal like I do non-metallic metal, I guess is my answer. There are multiple techniques to non-metallic metal, but they are largely over whether you're trying to replicate like the hyper realism style of like, you know, Lan, Pisarski or Kirill or somebody like that who really, or Andy Wardle does it. And like, there's lots of people who have a great skill at this, who are really good at capturing light pollution and reflections. But beyond that, it's, you know, NMM is kind of NMM. So, but give me some more color to that and I'll answer. Okay, Byth Talone. Hey, Vince, I have a question about painting pale demon skin on my Death Guard. Okay. I can't find a way for the base coat to cover brushed and after Zenithal. Well, what are you trying to use is my question. Like pale demon skin. Okay, well, that could be a lot of different things. You could be talking about like white, white purple, white pink, light greens, all those different things. You said Death Guard, so Death Guard tend to have green tones. My answer over Zenithal is, I mean, in general, like you can't glaze with lighter colors. It kind of sucks. So my answer in general would be like pick something that's more neutral tone or something like that. You know, set yourself up with your Zenithal. Like when I do dead pale flesh, I don't just Zenithal. I reverse Zenithal with purple. So in other words, like if this is the model, there's my model. Here we go. If this is the model, right, and you go black all over and then gray like this and white like this, I then do purple like this. Okay. And then basically I just work gray and pale tones in here. I mean, she has pretty pale skin. That was the beginning of this. Now there's a lot more. Like this is a competition piece. So like this had tons of skin work. But that was the way I started it. Same technique. And then just work like your very pale, you know, pinks and pink grays and or something like that, whatever tone you happen to be, or green grays or something like that into the midtone. Okay. Let's see. CRS, have you tried the new Scale 75 fluorescents? I have not. I saw them. I do want to try them. I've been playing around with a couple different fluorescents lately, actually. I really like the new Scale 75 fluorescents, like in look. Haven't painted with them, but like I love hyper bright paints and, you know, really intense neon pigmentation. So yeah, I do plan on giving them a purchase, and, you know, a review will be incoming at some point. The shop I normally order my Scale 75 from. Keep in mind, here in the States, we often get Scale 75 stuff a little slower than you might get it in Europe, because we have to wait for our US distributors that carry it to pick it up. And so I was waiting on the place I normally order from that is generally one of my go-to places that's people I trust, and they didn't have it yet. All right. Okay. By Talon says, oh, glazing the violet into the shadows is easy, but I struggle with the pale highlights without doing like 7 coats. I am using Scale 75 colors. Any tips? Yeah, I don't know what colors you're using, but for my pale demon skin, I use Miskatonic Gray a lot. If you need something thicker, use Nakar. Nakar is like a light brown, white, gray. It's kind of a warm gray. That would be a good one. You can use some Hellbound Flesh. This is a really good one. Sorry, it's upside down. Hellbound Flesh. It's green purple, but trust me, it actually comes out quite pale and more white green purple. It's a really nice color. You can also, if you put just a tiny amount of pink into it, pink and that light green are going to be complementary and cancel each other out. So you get this really nice light gray tone. I would say try that. I don't really have a problem with covering it. So you might need to pop your Zenithal up a little higher. If you're having trouble covering with that stuff, then it sounds like your Zenithal is still too dark, because the top of your Zenithal should be darn near white. So I don't know. Just thoughts. Hopefully that helps. But you know, if you've tried all the stuff I'm saying, you can respond as much, and I'll try to keep giving new answers. Okay. Dave says, do you think using masking with painter's tape is a bad idea, as it would pull the paint off after ripping the tape off the Mini? Yes, 100%. Like I said, I have a video on masking coming out in about 45 minutes, and you can see what I think about masking tape and stuff like that in there, and why you don't use it, because it will rip the paint off. Spoilers. All right. Matt Capelli. I saw you're coming to Philly in February for a paint class, but it looks to be an airbrush class. Do you teach, or can you recommend another painting seminar? I don't have space for an airbrush right now. I am. It is partially an airbrush class, day one, because it's about painting a Night Titan, the February class. So it's gonna be, very much like there's gonna be a lot of airbrush work on day one, and then day two is gonna be a lot of like weathering and freehand and detail. It's basically painting a display quality Titan. Yeah, sure. As to painting classes, absolutely. I mean, my best advice is try to go to any one of the conventions that has good painting classes. So if you're near Philly, then you're probably not that far from Northern Virginia and from DC, where Nova Open is held in September. There is a host of amazing painting classes there. I'm not counting myself in that. Like, I teach there, but like there are so many amazing people who teach there that you could not go wrong with that. And they have tons of good brush classes. Beyond that, like several of the big conventions that are up and down the East Coast, or, AdeptCon is in Chicago. The registration for that goes live tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow. And there's incredible painters there who are teaching a ton of classes. That's probably my best advice. Like, unfortunately, there's not as many people doing straight 2 days where they go around here in the States, mainly because of the size. It's just harder to cover the space. The UK has a lot more like people who do 2-day workshops, because that country is the size of the Westfield Mall, so you can just kind of drive anywhere and get there pretty fast. I'm being somewhat facetious. I don't want to insult anybody from the UK, but your country is not that big. And that being said, like, I know here in the States, Matt DiPietro does a lot of 2-dayers. He just finished up one on doing textures in Indianapolis last weekend. So go to Contrast Minis and look at his schedule where he's teaching. Go to Miniature Monthly. They teach a lot of stuff like that. So there's lots of options. It's just they're more diffuse, and it's entirely likely that there might not be anything in a city near you for a while, just because, again, geography. Okay. Aviad says, general one, any tips on what to do when you get into a painting, I assume you mean rut? Been stripping more minis than painting the last 2 weeks. Can't seem to be happy with anything I painted. Yeah, here's my best advice. Never strip anything. I don't know why you would strip a mini ever. I've never stripped a mini that I've painted. Not once, not ever, and I never intend to. And believe me, if you think I'm a good painter, thank you. That's very nice. But believe me, it's not like I just suddenly started painting at whatever skill level I paint at now. I got lots of crap on my shelves that I've painted. My best advice is finish what you're doing. Stripping is completely antithetical to what you're trying to accomplish. Like, if your goal is improvement, and that's what it sounds like, and you want to have something, whatever, that you want to improve, you want to take your next step, don't strip. You're just forgetting all your lessons. It's like getting in a time machine because you failed a test. Like, no, just keep learning, figure out what you did wrong on the test, and pass the next one. I mean, I know that sounds somewhat harsh, but like, I do not understand the mini stripping thing. Finish it. Just keep working with it. It's paint. It's thin. You can just keep painting it. Just keep pushing the paint around until you get to somewhere you like. This mini that I'm painting right now, this thing is one of the most frustrating things I've ever painted. I mean, I've had lots of conversations, sort of with people who who I talk to about painting, and just been like, going back and forth and bouncing ideas, which is another thing. Yeah, bring in other people, talk to people, share your work, ask for feedback. That's my best advice. Like, bring in the community. There's so many people who are out there who are willing to help, and bring in your friends, bring in other painters you trust, and have them give you feedback. You have them give you advice on what you can do next, and just keep pushing through it. And when you get to the end, it's not going to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. There is no perfect mini. No one has ever painted one ever. It's not going to be you. It's not going to be me. It's not going to be anyone, because that thing doesn't exist. But what you will have is a finished mini, and a finished mini you should be happy with, but never satisfied. I'm never satisfied with a paint job that I complete, but I can be happy with them sometimes. And you should be happy because you got to the end of that mini, and that's a great accomplishment. Whatever the quality or skill level you came out with, whatever the flaws, it's an accomplishment and something to be celebrated. Finishing something is good. And what you should then do next is look at it and figure out what you can learn from it, because there's always stuff we learn from our own work, from our successes and our failures. Why do we fall down, Mr. Wayne, to get back up again? So my advice is push through, talk to people, bring in friends and collaborate, and have them give you advice and share, and learn from what you feel wasn't good and try something else. Now, there's a secondary thing here of maybe you're painting something you don't really want to paint, right? Like I don't want to play psychologist, but like if you're having trouble because you're painting something that you feel like is a responsibility for an army and you're just not keen on it, and so it's just like, ugh, the will isn't there, and we've all been in that place, all of us who are hobbyist painters, then my advice is put it to the side. It doesn't need to be done. We tend to put this pressure on ourselves unduly that like something for our army has to be done. It doesn't. It's not. It's not a bill that has to be paid. It's not, you can get that sort of Damocles away from your head. Change up, paint something else, try something different. Grab a couple of Bones Figs or some Nolzur's Marvelous Minis or something different. Try something you haven't painted before. Experiment, use that to create a shock to the system and experiment with a new technique. Get a new paint that you're really excited for. Paint a different color than you normally paint with, right? And see what you can do. I know that was a really long-winded answer, but the trick is you shouldn't get down on yourself. You have the talent and the skill to finish the thing and to get there and to learn and to take the next step. I don't need to know anything about what you painted to know it, Aviad, because we all do. Everybody does. Okay. James Valdez, working on a Maw Crusher. Skin tone is dark green with lighter green highlights. Wings are Ogren camo with Agrax wash with Ogren highlights. What color should I use for the spines of the wings? You mean like the bone protrusions, I assume you mean? Well, you've got a very green dude, so you want something that's going to contrast that in some way. But that being said, they're bone. The easy answer is just some kind of warm white, and that's fine. Like brown to white bone, that standard stuff would look perfectly fine on a green Maw Crusher. I don't know that you have a need to go to some crazy color thing, like to some crazy contrasting color. If you want to get a little exciting, use some kind of deep ruddy brown, like almost a red brown as your low color on the bone. Work a little bit of red because that's complementary. Lightly, we're talking glaze here. We're talking the low color, but like a red brown. I don't know the GW paints well enough to tell you, but something like that. I know that GW has several red browns, like maybe Mornfang is kind of a red brown. I don't know off the top of my head. But like something like that could be an interesting take, because then that'll give you that play of complementary colors without needing to like paint the whole bone red, which would just look silly. All right. Okay. Whoa. Okay. Okay, Macapelli, recommendations for video tutorials on wet blending. Well, I have several, so you could start there. Beyond that, I don't know. I think Sam Lenz. Yeah, Sam has a couple videos, probably through Tabletop Minions, where he does wet blending. Sam's like is a master of wet blending. I mean, the key is you need some kind of like, use thicker paint than you think, use some kind of retardant medium, and clean your brush in between when you try to bring them together. Those are my 3 hot tips right there. James says I tried Null Oil. Yeah, don't use that. Don't use black. You don't want black in there. Black is the opposite of color or visual interest. It's just gonna kill everything out. Sebastian Weiss, 2 questions. Sure, that's okay. 1, I want to go from Citadel to colors that work better with glazing blending. Should I go right to scale 75, or is that jump too high and Vallejo would work better? I mean, if you're trying to do glazing and blending, scale 75 is pretty great at it. It's great for wet blending and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't think it's fine. You're going to have to relearn either way. If you're learning the new technique, you're going to have to learn how to use the new paints. And like both watercolors and scale 75 being gel mediums are very different paints to paint with. But that being said, there's no reason why you couldn't learn it. Sure. I mean, my paint desk right now in front of me has probably 5 different brands of paint on it, but the 2 main ones are watercolors and scale 75. Let's see, just in case you're curious, let's see, I have Green Stuff World and FW inks and Reaper and watercolors and P3 inks and scale 75. I think that's it right now. There you go. That's what's on my desk. So yeah, you can, I'm sure you could. Sebastian's question 2. One of my next projects would be airbrushing Imperial Fists, and I want to work along your Warm Zenithal video. Yes, good choice. Can I use that same color buildup, and what would you do for the yellow? Yes, I would do exactly that thing. It's funny. I have a marine I want to do in an Imperial Fist scheme. I actually really like Imperial Fist colors. I was thinking of painting one just for fun. Like I have one of those 30th edition Marines that I thought would 30th anniversary Marines or whatever. That I thought would be fun to do as an Imperial Fist. But yeah, I would do the same thing. Light, dark sort of brown to light rust to ivory. And yeah, I would use some kind of ochre. Specifically, if you want an exact color, sure. Nope, not that. I would probably use Model Air Yellow Ochre. Pretty much the simplest thing that you got. That'll turn very bright yellow over the ivory highlights. So there you go. Let's see. Banky Wright, what do you use for filler? Do you mean like to fill gaps? A lot of different things. Gloss medium, plastic putty. Plastic putty is from Vallejo. It's this stuff. Perfect putty. I don't use liquid green stuff because I think it's actually a kind of bad product. What else do I use? I guess if it's like a super large gap, like if I'm working on, like it depends on what we're talking about here. If I have a gap on like a display board or a piece of terrain, maybe DAP, like literally like drywall paste, but I would never use that on like a miniature. And then you sand all that down. So, but yeah, all those things. It just depends on the size of the crack I'm trying to fill. Okay, Bidoof, I'm currently painting the old, I read that as old Blood Angels color scheme with flashy yellow, and I'm trying to paint it in a non-metallic metal, but I struggle with it. Yeah, I mean, I would just use traditional non-metallic metal, like Blood Angels with that red and gold. Like that's fine. You want classic colors where you want the yellow. Just use a more yellow-based, non-metallic metal. So that is to say, make sure you're really popped with your yellow. And non-metallic metal gold can have lots of reds and oranges and deep browns and sepias and blacks and all that stuff in it. Like it can be a million different colors. I mean, it's a great example. Again, I keep picking this up, but like this is non-metallic metal that's extremely cold and has greens in it, right? So you can use anything in it, but my strong recommendation would be just keep it mainly in a more traditional scheme and use largely like an ochre color. With a little bit of a push toward a brighter yellow at the top. But if you're like, one of the keys with non-metallic gold is you don't really want yellow, you want ochre. And so if you're trying to do yellow, because in your mind, those old Blood Angels were yellow, like that's going to be very hard to do non-metallic with because real yellow doesn't look like gold. This is not yellow, right? That's gold. That's not yellow. There you go. Okay. David Wilcox, are you any relation to Party Elite? No. I've been accused of sounding like Steve Buscemi before, which, okay. That's cool. He's famous and rich, so neat. I've got a secondary career. I guess like if he needs to stand in on some voice work, I can do that for him. Oliver Coke. I'm just going to say Oliver. Hi, Oliver. I'm bad at pronouncing names. By the way, if I butcher your name, I'm very sorry. I'm terrible with pronunciations in general. Okay, hi Vince. I tried to achieve a cell shading look, but I failed to achieve a good look in 3D. Do you have any tips and advice for this style of painting? Yeah, the cell shading thing is cool. The trick with it is you really need to look at your source material. One of the problems with cell shading is it honestly, like, cell shading is a two-dimensional art style. It's you when you look at a cell shaded, you know, anime or comic or something like that, you're seeing it from one angle at any given point in time. I understand that, like in anime or animation, a thing moves, but nonetheless, that's an illusion, right? That's just a bunch of individual frames. Um, so like when you actually then hold a 3D thing and turn it around in your hand, and the lines don't move accordingly, it can look off. So my advice is pick an angle, and that's the angle that this thing is viewed from, and do all your lines and cell shades and stuff like that to that angle, and look at source material for something that is also at that angle. Look how they place light and shadow and lines and thick ink lines and stuff like that, and mimic that. And it's going to look weird from any other direction. Like, that's just accept that. Like, it's not a three-dimensional art style, right? So it's going to look weird if you flip it around or turn it upside down, because it's not, the thing that you have faked is not responding. It's the same problem with non-metallic metal when you put it in 3 dimensions, right? It looks awesome in box art where you have like one picture or one image. But oftentimes when you turn it or look at it in weird angles where the light now starts interacting in weird ways with the miniature, it can look off. Same thing's going to happen there. But just accept that and be like, and know the angle you're operating from, paint to that, take your pictures from that, you're good to go. It's a tough style, though. It really is, because you're trying to replicate a very specific artistic license. Okay. Asteroid TV says hi. Hi. Slippery Squid. Hi, Vince. What's your favorite cheese? I prefer mature cheddar and think that anyone that tastes like a Stilton-based cheese must be in league with Satan and all his demons. That's a good question. It's a very important hobby-related question. Probably like a baby Swiss made by the Amish. I live near Amish country, so that's my favorite cheese. It's really good. Okay. Any tips on how to do corn armor? Corn armor that is dried blood, like their book mentions. The one you need to kill a lot to get. Yeah, sure. Stippling. If you want to go that direction, paint the armor fairly, like just a neutral bone-ish color or something, creamy ivory, and then stipple lots of really dark reds, stipple dark browns, stipple reds, stipple pinks, stipple some blood for the blood god or something like that. A little bit. I don't know. Like mix it all around over and over again. And then do that all again. Right? Like repeat what I just said 3 times. So you get this like incredibly overlaid series of dots and dark colors and stuff like that. And use the stippling to heed your shadows. Like still do your normal shadows and highlights. So like if it was the shoulders, I'd push my darker whole reds mostly here, but I'd bring a little bit up to the top to show the darker speckles. But you still mostly heed the shadows and highlights. You just have this more dot pattern to it. That's how I do it. Okay. If you were going to, Arthur Marshall, if you were going to base an army to have an angelic feather motif, how would you do it? Do you mean like what would be, I'm not sure I understand your question. Do you mean like the basing scheme, like base an army? Or do you mean like base an army around an angelic motif? If I was going to base an army around an angelic motif, I don't know. I wouldn't probably, because I'm not sure what that means, but I love angels. All of my wallpapers are just angels from Magic the Gathering, because it was always my favorite creature type, and I love the art of angels in Magic. But I guess lots of robes, gossamer robes, translucent things, bright colors. Should be mostly like whites and near whites and clean, crisp, warm colors. Lots of yellows and things that feel heavenly and embracing in sunshine. That probably sounds like the best answer. However you want to interpret that. It's a neat challenge. That's kind of a cool thought. I've never thought about trying to like think of a thing like that as an army around and try to take that artistic interpretation. It's a cool idea. All right, Crazy Horse question. Have you ever tried the pearlescent inks from like Forge World that are gold and silver? Thoughts? Forge World. FW. It's really funny. My brain just goes to that, even though I'm staring at an FW ink in front of me. No, I really haven't. I've tried a couple of metal inks. They're okay. I haven't been blown away by them. I haven't tried the pearlescent inks yet. They seem worth a try, as it seems like you could get some neat effects out of them, but I have not tried them before. Hi, Vince. Do you have any tips for rusty armor? I've used the Vallejo Model Wash Rust directly in the recesses of the armor with a metal underneath, but I find it flat and washy. Yep, sure. Sure. Here's my tips for rusty armor. Tuck in, because it's a lot of work. Rusty armor is like, I have many videos on weathering and rust, and I would highly recommend them. But the similar theme you're going to hear out of all of those is you have to tell a story. Weathering isn't in the void. Like, that is to say, a piece of armor looks like it looks. A human decided to make it, right? So they can make it look like whatever they want. If they want crenellations and weird things and symbols and whatever, that's because some human decided that's what it looks like. But weathering happens by a process. Nature dictates rules to this, right? And so you have to think of those rules of the road and operate accordingly. Realistic weathering is actually an extremely time-consuming process to make something look right. So, like, water will tend to gather in recesses. So those need to be darker and brown and go to rust. Edges will tend to get chipped. When edges get chipped, they go rusty faster. So where you have chipped and worn edges, they need to go brown and rusted quicker, especially at the heart of the thing. If you're scraping paint, there's a particular way you need to highlight that paint as it scrapes, and then how that exposes the metal and rusts underneath. My best advice is just follow nature. Look at examples. Things, if they're left to weather, like if they're untreated steel, it will go to rust pretty darn fast if you leave it outside and don't treat it properly. Like, one of the classic problems for soldiers in sort of a medieval or any time period where we're using mainly steel was treating your weapons and armor so they didn't, go to rust. Because if you're on a long campaign for a couple months and you're fighting with any kind of regularity, even like once a month or once every couple of weeks, it's pretty easy or just carrying them around. It's pretty easy for your weapons to rust out fairly fast. Hence why, like, you had to oil them and polish them and stuff like that. It was a big deal. Upkeep on those kinds of things is extremely time consuming. So my answer is just follow nature, right? And think about, like, how would things streak? Where would water collect? Where would enemy weapons tend to impact and cause battle damage, and then hence cause weathering and rust? And follow that. Like, there's no simple wash technique that's going to get it for you. Weathering has to be intentional to look realistic, and so it's time consuming. But that being said, short answer is it will tend to gather around raised areas, edges, and recesses. When I say raised areas, I mean, like, think of Ironjaw's armor, like on a point. That's where their armor comes up to an edge, like a highlight, like a point like that is going to tend to be where things chip it and scuff it. Like, that's what's going to stop the sword before anything else. All right. Isaac's Miniature says, thanks for my reply to his comment a couple weeks ago. Sure. Happy to help, man. Okay. All right. Isaac's Miniatures, random question. Have you ever played or painted Privateer Press models or games? I have not. I don't play any Warhammer Hordes or anything like that. I don't like their models. Sorry. Personal taste. I've always found them to be aesthetically unpleasing. That is in my humble opinion only. What appeals to us is our own. If you love them, then it's right for you. I have no problem with that. But I've always just found them to be odd and weirdly shaped and samey, and they don't have character to me. Again, all of that is to me and how I have perceived them. If you love them, that's perfectly fine. There are many painters who, here in the US and abroad, who love their minis and do incredible things with them. Perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with that. The exception is that big Archangel thing. I thought that was a neat model. I thought that guy was cool. Like that dragon thing or whatever he was. Okay. Oh, you're welcome, Joe Worthauber. I'm happy to do so. And thank you for hooking me up with that awesome plinth that's going to go on a bus that I have sitting over here. That'll be one of my next projects. Joe in the comments, Joe Worthauber makes plinths. And so I purchased one off of him recently, and I was so super happy with it. Such high quality. He has a great studio that does plinths and stuff like that. So if you're looking for plinths for competition, I would recommend you reach out to him. Okay. Joseph Unger. Whoa, my comments jumped all of a sudden. There you go. Joseph Unger. Hey, Vince, can you recommend a high quality brush that keeps a solid tip for free handling? I'm currently using weasel hair brushes, which work well, but I find it hard to keep the tip sharp. Yeah, I mean, anything like that sounds like it's more a problem of the paint than the brush. There's a lot to sharp tip, but let's talk it through real quick. Sure. Scarf, Da Vinci, Raphael, Winsor and Newton, Artis Opus, Broken Toad, any of those. I thought about doing like a full scale brush review, and I might do it at some point in time where I order some of all of those and show that effectively there's almost no difference. Like there are small differences. I prefer the spring of Winsor and Newton as opposed to the spring of Broken Toad. For example, I find Broken Toad too soft, but you might not. The real key to maintaining a sharp tip is well flowing thinned paint, like an ink. Paint is never going to want to stay on a sharp tip. Paint is dried. It's thick. It wants to move not how you want it to move. It's jelly. Whereas, here's the example I give. Imagine you put the acrylic paint that's in your thing, put that into an ink pen and try to write with it. How well does that ink pen write? The answer is not at all, right? But that's what you're asking your brush to do. If your paint is basically any thicker than an ink when you're doing that. So the key is like high intensity pigment, mixing in some inks and having some flow improver. I have a video called Sharp Thin Lines, how to paint sharp thin lines. I would highly recommend on that. That's probably my best advice. So, but it's a combination of you need pigment density plus flow improver to get like a really intense ink-like pigment. And then any any sort of sable hairbrush should do the trick. That being said, use a bigger brush than you might be. Like you might be trying to use a very small brush, like a like a 3/0 or a 2/0. Stop that. That's what's killing you, because those want to spread very simply. They're not meant to actually paint long amounts of time. They're meant to do tiny little bits of work. If you want to do a sharp thin line, get a nice like size 1 or size 0, something like that. Like from any of those lines, they'll all maintain hyper sharp tips, and then you can do your nice sharp line with just the tip and proper control and wicking off the excess. Okay. Altseen. Will you ever show how to paint anything from the Deepkin range, namely the big boys with their water cape? I don't have any Deepkin. I don't have a great interest in it. I think they're neat. It's just not something I enjoy. I mean, I don't tend to do like I will never do like here's how to paint a miniature from end to end. That will never be a thing on my channel. Like you're never going to get like how to paint the the Eidolon of Mathland. Like that's not going to be a video you ever see here. Now that being said, I could see doing a video on how to paint like that water effect. That's an interesting one. I can add that to the list. Whether I did it with the Eidolon or something else, I think that's actually quite a useful thing. Like he has that neat water cape, and that understanding how to paint waves in water and show the sort of translucent transition of water, I think is actually a pretty useful technique. So I will add that to the list. In fact, I will literally do it right this second because I keep my list up at all points in time to add things to. This is me typing it. So there we go. Added to the list because I think that could be cool. And that's really the challenge of that guy. Everything else on him is just, armor. So maybe we'll see if I pick one up at some point in time. I got a lot of stuff that I got to paint. Okay. But, so the water's on the list. Okay. Scott R says, good morning. Morning, buddy. Ben, question, Zenithal highlights. I just started over a tan primer for plague bearers, but the highlight seems to disappear when I apply a shade and a dry brush. Okay. Well, when you say over a tan primer, I'm going to assume you mean some kind of like tan Zenithal, because if we're talking about like Zenithal means that it's darker from below and highlight from above. The answer there is, that give me just a moment. Okay. So the answer there is, you want to have thinner paints. Like you're still using your base wash, dry brush highlight method. You don't necessarily do that when you're zenithaling, right? you when you're zenithaling, what you want to do is work more in thinner glazes. Use the zenithal to be your highlights. So you don't necessarily want to all over wash. You want to be more controlled with it. Or if you do wash, you want it to be, a more thin, controlled, what we'd call a soft wash, right? Where it's thinned out with like some Lamia medium or glaze medium or something, or it's forced more into just the recesses and things like that. If you still go to the old style of that's meant more for like covering the base coat, you're not going to see, you are going to cover your zenithal. But my recommendation is make that first layer of paint thinner and you won't have that problem. Getting that first layer as a glaze into the right consistency is really the learning curve for getting the most out of your zenithal. But once you nail it and get it, it's wonderful and so fast. Okay. All right. Let's see. Mark Carragher. I'm in the 9th of a 12-hour paintathon of my new Corn Army project. Awesome. That's sweet. I'm desperate to crack on with the airbrush, but I'm having consistent problems with clossing, because that's a thing. Clogging. So depressing. New parts. Deep cleaning. Yeah, I mean, my best advice with that is, one, make sure that you are thinning your paints enough. Make sure you're giving it a good clean in between. And moreover, if you keep seeing clogging, how are you cleaning it? I'm reaching over here because I want to grab something. Oftentimes your thing can look clean, but not really be. So my advice is you need to get this. This is a little thing you can get as part of a cleaning kit for a couple bucks on Amazon. You get this and like some little, like, I don't know. These have a name, but I don't remember what it is. These little brushes. So you get all those for a couple bucks. And what this is your needle cleaner. Be careful. This will literally kill somebody. This is so sharp. But it's this hyper fine thing that goes down to like the tiniest of points. And it's meant to fit all the way. It will fit all the way through your airbrush needle. Okay. And you want to get that nozzle actually cleaned out. And this has like a flat side. This is not going to show on camera, but this has like a sharp point and a flat side. So it can actually scrape out the interior of that nozzle safely. Because what's happening is if you keep getting clogging as you're cleaning the airbrush, but you're not cleaning the nozzle, there's still some amount of paint left in there hidden. And by the way, it can be very hard to see. Like you might be able to even look through the nozzle and still see light, but not see the hidden paint on the sides of the nozzle. The shape of a nozzle is such that it can really easily hide paint on the side. And as new paint hits that old paint, it's going to naturally clog quite easily. So that would be my recommendation. You mentioned the deep cleaning. Yep, that's the right thing. And that's how I would do it. Okay. Rebecca Ireland. Hi, Vince. Hello. How you doing? All right. James Hadley. Hi, Vince. I'm going to be starting Thousand Suns soon in their standard color schemes. Any tips? Going to try to Zenithal rather than Duncan's layer tutorial. Yeah, sure. I actually just did some Thousand Suns recently in their traditional color scheme. You'll probably see them at the beginning of the year. I think they'll publish them in February. But anywho, yes, I do. As a matter of fact, for mine, I used some of this. This is FW turquoise ink. It looks very blue on camera right now. It's actually I assure you, that's just because the weird color grade on my camera. In reality, this is really close to the color of the Thousand Suns, like shockingly close. Like I'm looking at it here in the bottle. It's so freaky to me to hold this up, and on camera, it looks completely blue, and here it looks completely turquoise. Life's weird. Anyways, I used this, and I used some like Warcolors turquoises to get my highlights, and it came out really nice. So I just kind of thinned all that down, went over a Zenithal. It's like the turquoise color of Thousand Suns is fantastic for a Zenithal. So just something like that is what I used, but anything like that, you can, thin it down, get it into a good glaze, go over a strong standard like black to white Zenithal. If you want to be clever, you can do a little purple as your low color. Green, when it lays over purple, becomes a dark shadow, but it becomes a more rich shadow. So there's an option. If you want to get a little saucy with it, don't have to, but that's a fun way to do it. If you want to be a little sporty. Okay. Rebecca says, how would you approach salamander skin? So if I understand right, salamander's skin is actually like black, not of African descent, but like black, like the color of coal. And how I would approach it is much the same as I would approach any skin tone that's unusual, which is I would use that color as the majority of the tone. It would replace all these midtones, and I would start mixing in Caucasian flesh tone or whatever you want to say to capture like highlights and stuff like that. Because even if their skin's black, it's still going to come to some kind of highlight. And as the light interacts with it, assumingly it warms up and they have some kind of normal like blood underneath and stuff like that. So it's still going to show pink tones and things like that. And that's what you're capturing by like where the skin goes thin or where the light hits it. Skin is naturally translucent, weakly so, but it is. I mean, if you've ever held your finger over a light bulb, your skin is translucent. If it was opaque, you would not see any light come through. And so something like that, I think would be the way I'd go about it. The key is you always want a little bit of normal skin tone in those unusual color mixes. So when I'm doing like orange skin or blue skin or anything like that, gray skin, I still use normal flesh tone in my like upper mid to highlights because then the human eye will still read it as skin tone. Anything that's in that like brown to pink to orange white, which is Caucasian flesh spectrum, will the eye will start reading it as normal skin. I would probably take a little bit of deep browns in the transition as well. That would be my smoothing point between the flesh and the darker black brown color. All right. Joseph Unger, I'm trying my first attempts at freehanding and can't seem to get the right ratio of flow aid to paint to water. Any help? I'm taking a drink here for a moment. Define right ratio. If you mean whenever you then touch the miniature, paint goes everywhere, that's because you aren't wicking your brush off. Wicking your brush means after you get paint to the end of it, you touch it to the end of to a paper towel or something like that, and you make the extra liquid run out into the paper towel. If you mean it's too thin to show up, you just got to keep mixing it and playing with it. Yeah, I mean, it can be tough. It's a big challenge. You're not wrong. Like, I'm not going to lie. I fight this battle all the time, man. You are not alone. Simpatico, brother. The reality is that, like, getting the exact right paint consistency / density is always going to be a bit of a fight. My best recommendation is always keep your originals separate on your wet palette. So keep your paint over here, your ink over here, your flow and brew over here. Pull them together into a new mix and then mix it down here. Because if you're just trying to do it all from one mix, once you've polluted that one mix, that's it forever. It's done. If you get it wrong, you're done. But if I make a new mix down here and it's slightly wrong, I can grab a little more paint, pull it down, spread it out. Am I right now? Let me test on the back of my hand. Like the back of my glove here that I was working on, you can, it's probably too small, but you can see where I was testing little freehand patterns to make sure I had the right consistency for just that reason. And then like, no, not quite right. Okay, let me get just a tiny little bit more paint, pull it out and mix it. Am I there yet? Am I there yet? And then, you know, you just play back and forth until you get what you want. As long as your original paints are like separate in your wet palette, you keep the paint and the ink and the flow improver all up here on, you know, clean. You could just keep pulling from what you need down into your working space. Rail, can you quickly list Tom's 1K list for the doubles tourney you both won recently? Sure. 30 Witches, Double Knives, 30 Witches, Knife and Shield, Hag, Queen on Cauldron, or Hag, Queen on Cauldron, and that's it. That's, oh, and then, sorry, and then, because that's 900 points, and then, Canary, Heart Renders. There you go. Okay. Rebecca Ireland, Vince, can you please give your top 10 paints? No. I wouldn't even know where to begin. I have talked about it in some videos. Oh, geez. I mean, like, it'd be very hard to narrow it down. All right, very quickly, off the top of my head and understanding I will miss things. Here we go. FW Payne's Gray, thing I use more than anything else. FW White Ink, also thing I use almost more than anything else. Black Leather from Scale 75, incredibly great shade color. I mean, many of these are on my palette right now. Bloodfest Crimson, because I love pinks and can't stop using this. It's addictive. Let's see. Despair Green from the same range, because I love teal and I'm the tyrant of teal and will always put teal in everything I can. Let's see. Thinking. All right. What else makes sense here as like something I would go to generically? Um, some light flesh tone, though honestly, I keep bouncing around on what I like on that, so I don't know that I can narrow it down. Probably like extra opaque, heavy, warm gray because it's a great reset color that I use all the time. I'm just looking at like all my paints, trying to think of what else I use. Vallejo metal color, steel and silver. As for true metals, those are beyond compare. Uh, yeah, there's more. I'm forgetting stuff, but that's a good list. Everything else is like color dependent and so project dependent and just what I'm going at. Okay, Joseph Unger, I'm almost finished with my 15 millimeter Soviet and German armies. Can I post them to the PMP? I'm nervous because I'm not very good, but I like to share these guys. Yeah, man, please do share them, brother. Like that in the PMP, we welcome painters of all skill types. Post them however you want. Put it if you want. If you want it on the video, then post it under the appropriate thing. If you want it just in finished products, you want feedback. It's an incredibly supportive community. Many of the people who are in that community are in this chat right now. We love seeing work, especially different stuff like that. I love seeing historicals and different scales we don't normally see. So please do share. It's always a treat. And you know, it doesn't matter what skill level you're at. It's we all we all started bad. I don't know what else to tell you. And you're not bad. Like we all were at one time not great, and we all are at a different place now. That's just the nature of it. It's a journey, and nobody should ever feel bad about where they are on their own hobby journey. If you're taking steps, then you're doing well. That's great. That's all there is to it. Okay, let's see. Alexander, what do you think about different varnishes on one miniature? I normally use GW Munitorum varnish, which is satin. Looks good for armor, but skin and cloth, I would matte afterwards. Yeah, sure. You can like contrast of finish is a thing you can play with. There's no reason why you can't do that. I tend to like a more uniform thing, but that's just my style. Like I tend to like things to be completely hyper matte, but there are exceptions. For example, if I use TMM, I don't varnish that at all, and I don't believe in varnishing metals, because it just ruins your metal paint. But you know, yeah, that's a great example of different finishes right there, and one we don't often think about, right? So yeah, nothing wrong with that at all. And yes, he said, and thank for the recommendation on the AK stuff. It's magic. It is. AK Ultra Matte Varnish, folks. I did a review on it recently. It blows my mind. Okay, Rebecca Ireland. How can I overcome my self-doubt as a painter? I have only painted for just over a year. I joined online groups and felt rubbish. Well, you've only painted for just over it. Like, I'm going to start with the hard answer here, Rebecca. Okay. You've only painted for a year. How good did you think you were going to be? You know, that's like saying you join online groups. Online groups are wide open, right? So you're comparing yourself to everybody in the world. Like some of the best people in the world post in those groups. That's like saying, well, I've only been running track for a year, and I feel really bad that Olympic sprinters crush my time. Yeah, you're darn right they do, because that's their whole life. And they've been doing it for, you know, since they could run, they started training for that. Yeah, that's okay. Bill Gates has a famous quote: humans tend to underestimate what they can do in a year, overestimate what they can do in a year, and underestimate what they can do in 10. And I find that very true for miniature painting. Like, you say you painted for a year. How many hours do you paint a week? Multiply that by 52. How many hours you been painting? Let's say you paint 20 a week, which is pretty high for most people, right? That means in a year, you've put in 1,000 hours, which is not bad. But if mastery of a thing is 10,000 hours, that's where you're at. 10% of your journey's done. My best answer on self-doubt is never look in someone else's bowl and compare what you have to them. Only look in your own and wonder if you can help someone else. That's what I try to live by. It's rough. Like, I'm not going to lie. I know I'm being somewhat flippant with my answers here because we do all naturally compare ourselves. There are biologic reasons for this. Humans were originally, you know, started in groups of 150 people, and that's all we had to compare ourselves against. And now suddenly we live in a world where we're more or less in constant comparison with 7 billion people. And that's a bit overwhelming and dread-inducing. My best advice is, you know, there are positive communities out there. The PMP is one, but there are many others. And understand that you shouldn't compare yourself to those other people, especially not if those people are doing it professionally, if they've been doing it for 10 or 15 years, something like that. Let me tell this story to see if I can do it. This is a tangent, but I'm going to tell this story. My grandmother, who I love and who's gone, or loved and who's gone from this world, but was a wonderful old Italian lady who came over from Italy. Every Sunday would make a ragu, would make sauce, as Italian families often do. And for 50 years, she would work this sauce every Sunday. Every Sunday, she made this sauce. It's like a 12 to 20 hour process to make a good ragu in traditional Italian fashion. And she would do that. She'd wake up at like 4 or 5 in the morning. She'd get it going. They'd go to church, come back, be ready for dinner. Maybe she'd start on Saturday. And I would have it, and it would blow my mind. I can't eat Italian food in restaurants now, like not Southern Italian food, because it doesn't compare to hers. And it was a wonderful experience to eat that food. She was so talented with it. She had spent her life perfecting her recipes. Her recipes were what my grandfather owned a restaurant, and her recipes were what were the foundation for that restaurant. My wife got that recipe. My grandma gave my wife that recipe toward the end of her life. And my wife made that same sauce, followed the same recipe exactly, what my grandma had written down. And she gave me it, and she said, "What do you think?" And I said, "It's okay." And my wife was somewhat insulted. And I said, "Look, I don't know what your expectations were here. My grandmother made that sauce every day or every week for 50 years. Did you think you were going to nail it on the first try? Like, if otherwise, what do you think she was doing for 50 years?" Right? Now, I say that only to mean, like, in that case, it's fairly obvious to any of us from the outside that you can't, like, of course that should yield benefits, right? And you shouldn't feel bad about it. If you're taking a step, if you look at what you've painted now versus what you painted at the start of your year, and there's a difference, then you're doing great. You're succeeding. Don't compare yourself to others, because there's no purpose to that. People paint in different styles, have different journeys, different learning curves. Everybody's on their road together. Only compare you to your past you. And if you see a difference there, then you are successful as a miniature painter. Period. There is no other yardstick that matters. Okay? It's the best I can say. All right. Let's see. Bethany Graham made it. Have you tried Model Master Paints? No. Nope. I've played around a lot recently with mission models. I have some over here that's kind of out of reach. I like the mission model stuff. I haven't tried Model Master. I'll have to give that a shot. If you're recommending it, Bethany, you tell me. Okay. Let's see. Mark Carragher. I love axes, maybe too much. What's your favorite axe in AOS? Mine's a great axe on Corn, dual wielded by the Bloodthirster. Beauty. Yeah, the Corn Bloodthirster axes are really, really sweet. I did I think I did 2 of them on a Doom Bull, which I really liked. Wow, favorite axe. What a cool question. I don't know. My favorite axe I've ever painted, not on AOS, is on like the Savage Barbarian Beauty model or whatever that was done by Black Sun, 75mm mini. She has like a really cool sort of crenellated Celtic axe that's really nice and has a nice shape. I think I'll agree with you. That Corn Bloodthirster axe is probably the most fun one I did. I really do like those. They're pretty sweet. Axes are fun to paint because they have a lot of different angles and shapes. I know this sounds like a facetious conversation, but it's actually not. It's instructive. Like, swords are often boring because they're sort of like, you know, just a couple sides and flat. Axes have all sorts of cool angles and shapes and crenellations and neat places to play around with. So, no, I get that. I dig that. All right. Eric Rodrigo. Hi, Vince. A question. What should I use to thin a wash? Water, thinner, medium, glaze medium? Thanks and greetings from Chile. Oh, cool. I love Chile. I went there back in 2005 and had a wonderful time. I was there for about 2 weeks, and I loved that country. I thought it was really, really fun. So the answer is yes. In other words, yeah, you can use any of that stuff. Depends on what you're aiming at, right? In general, a wash is probably best thinned with some kind of medium. because a wash doesn't have a super high pigment density as it is. And when you break it up, like if you just need to thin it a tiny bit, water can be fine. Just a moist brush and stuff like that. That's fine. A little bit of water can work without issue. If you really are trying to get it thin and just like tint, then you probably want a medium to keep that pigment evenly dispersed, because water will break up the bond of the bonding agent of the acrylic medium. And then you'll get this like horrible coffee staining effect and stuff like that. So yeah, my advice would be yes to both. Depends on the purpose and how thin you're trying to go. Okay. Bethany says the Weathering magazine is great inspiration for some great weathering. Yeah, I mean, I take pictures of stuff in nature all the time. If you're on Instagram, you should be following Roman Lapot's Instagram called Tales of the Banana Whale. I know that's a weird name, but it's where he posts inspirational like color and weathering and unique compositional things just from daily life he sees. The man has such a great vision for seeing art in everyday life, and he shares them all the time, and they're just such good inspiration. He has lots of great pictures of like weathering and stuff he sees out in nature and things like that, and that's the kind of stuff you want to do. Just like I found myself in parking lots, like staring at rusted cars. Like I'm just sitting there staring at the car to really look at the way it's chipping the paint and rusting and streaking and stuff like that. I'm sure that's not creepy in any way. All right. Okay. All right. Sorry. I had to catch up here. What's the dog's name? There are 3 dogs behind me. They're all kind of walking around. Their names are Penny, the oldest, Lyra, the middle, and Aspen, the youngest. There you go. I have 3 golden retrievers. Brush recommendation. Anything I said before, like Scarf, Da Vinci, Raphael, Artis Opus, Broken Toad, Winsor Newton, Series 7. All fine. As well as, by the way, giant packs of cheap synthetic brushes you buy from Amazon. My best brush recommendation, I have a video on brush use and care. Go back. It's like Hobby Cheating in the 60s. Go back and look at that. That has all my recommendations on brushes. You should have a wide range of brushes, a couple nice ones that you use sparingly and for intended purposes, and a bunch of cheap ones that you can beat the crap out of and base coat with and wash with. And when they get tired, you throw them away, and you bought 10 of them for $5, and who cares? Okay. Kate, not hobby related. Do you plan to make other game design videos? Yes. Yes, I will make. I will always make game design videos whenever a thing catches my fancy. The problem with them is they take time, and a thing has to interest me. But yeah, I will. I've actually been bouncing around doing one on secondaries and schemes, like a follow up on that for a while, but just haven't had the time to sit down. It's actually an extremely busy time of year for me. Chris B, I've been painting for 2 years now, pretty intense, and I guess you get this question a million times, but is scale 75 something for me at my stage in learning? I use GW for 95% of my sessions. Sure. There's no point in time when scale 75 is fine. One of their great marketing tricks is that they've tricked everybody into believing that like it's some kind of high-end paint, like you need to go get your master's degree to use it or something. It's just a different style of paint. It's gel based. It's more based for wet blending and stuff like that. The answer is, do you want to change or experiment in the style with which you paint? Because if you try to use them like you're using your traditional GW paints in a base wash layer method, they will not do well for that. But if you're interested in trying different things like glazing over Zenithal or wet blending or stuff like that, they will exceed in that regard. So the question is just, is that what you want to do? And if the answer is yes, you kind of feel like you're at a point where you want to start experimenting with other styles, which, by the way, I would recommend to most people. Like, there is no right style of painting, but there's a right style for you. So if you experiment and test stuff and find a different style, then that could be great. And you might suddenly find you like, painting in a different way. And that's fine. Okay. Damien, late to the party, but I have a question. I managed to grab some Vallejo metal color. Awesome. I got the recommended steel, dark aluminum, and silver to start. I'm painting Hollowed Nights, no airbrush. Tips. Yes, absolutely. Here's my tips. You don't have an airbrush, that's okay. You're doing Hollowed Nights, so you want to do them all in that steel, I assume. So my recommendation is lay down a nice coat of the steel. Just like get that on there as your base coat. Metal does work. These work best in sort of that traditional style I was just talking about. So get a nice even coat of that steel over everything. Okay. And then get yourself like some black ink and get those 3 paints out on your palette and do some rough wet blending with them to get your highlights in place. I have a couple of videos where I use Vallejo metal color in this fashion. Go and watch those. You'll see how I wet blend them. If you go watch like I think it's like Hobby Cheating 105 or somewhere in that area where I do hammered steel weapons. I do it on an Iron Jaws weapon. Just don't do the latter part where I'm scuffing it and rusting it and chipping them up. But the initial part where I create the light work is exactly what I'm describing. And that's exactly how I would do Hollow Knights. So there you go. But effectively, once you've got that nice steel, you can then just kind of wet blend those paints over top of it. They blend like that really nicely. All right, Nikolai. I'm having trouble finding good cork for rocks. The sheets always read as cork, but I'm hoping to find something small and flat enough for something the size of Plague Bearers. Yeah, so the answer is don't just use cork. I just go buy the big cork mats. You get it like the hardware store or like at IKEA even has them or whatever, just or art stores or craft stores. You tear them up and then you need to put something over top. Like don't leave the top flat. I take a tool like this thing and I dig out chunks from the top and scuff it up. I like literally just drag this through the cork. And then I put grit and rocks on top. I leave little places for their feet. But other than that, that way it just doesn't look like cork. You're creating the cork looks so fake if it's rough on the sides and just flat on top. Whenever I see just the flat cork bases, I'm like, oh, because you could have done 3 minutes of more work and change that just literally by scraping the top with something sharp and then laying down some grit or sand or rocks or whatever on top. That's all there is to it. So yeah, I would say just like big cork mats are generally, you can get them at like the hobby store or at Home Depot or anything like that. And then just rough them up. Yeah, if you're looking for like rocks, I do agree. Damien said this and I will second that. Indoor pine bark, like wood chips make great rocks. They're often big, so you got to kind of break them up if you're on like a Plague Bearer's on 25, 32. I don't remember off the top of my head. I don't like Nurgle enough to know. Those can be good, but intermixing those in with some cork can also be fun. With some of my armies, I did that. Like I have them on rocks and stuff. So I have some on the ground, some on pine rocks, and some on cork built up rocks. And when you intermingle the 3, you actually get this really nice, natural, varied texture to it. Okay. All right. Bidoof, when is the video about Night Haunt? I love these ghostly boys and I'm trying to build an army of it. Yeah, that's a great question. I've wanted to do, I really, it's on my list. I want to do a new updated ghost video. I have a lot of things I've been trying to do recently. So there's just more videos than there is time. But it is happening. I don't know the answer to your question, but I will do. I want to do a how to sort of speed paint Night Haunt video to a high quality. It's coming. It'll happen. Let's see. Lunchbox. I just started working on NMM Gold for the first time. Do you have any tips for figuring out the shadow placement? Yes, watch Cujo Painting's video. That's the best thing I can do. So look up Cujo Miniature Painting. And if you look at his channel and search like Cujo Miniature Painting non-metallic metal, I think it's one of his most popular videos. He talks about where the shadows get placed on every type of surface based on its shape. It is one of the best explained videos I have ever seen. He uses graphics. He shows you the theory. Then he shows it on the mini. It is a really great video. If you can lock that stuff in your head, it will answer the questions for most shapes you need going forward. So it's way better than I could explain it. It's a relatively brief video, 15 or 20 minutes, and he does an amazing job with it. Cujo yelled at me a long time ago and got angry at me for something. But despite that, I still think he does good work, and I think that's an awesome video. So water under the bridge. I think he's a good dude and a good painter, and I think he made a great video. No matter how much he yelled at me. All right. Let's see. Camille, I learned Zenithal highlighting from you, and I'm really grateful for that. It really helped me to figure out where to place shadows and highlights. Awesome. Well, great. That's wonderful. I'm glad to hear it and happy to help. It's the way I start every single figure. And it's just, even if you end up painting over it with fairly thick paints or covering it, it's still so useful just to understand. your basic sketch and to pull out detail and to make it easier on your eyes to paint and to do your base coating simpler. Like oftentimes I will end up, because of the nature of the piece, covering a lot of the Zenithal. I would still do it because it just makes the whole process so much smoother. Tebow says, hearing you talking about FW white ink, I tested it and thought it was very runny, thin, and transparent. I had a hard time reproducing what you do for a quick NM later enhanced Zenithal. Huh. Maybe it wasn't mixed properly or you got a bad batch. That's weird because it's super opaque for me. Maybe try putting like, have you tried really stirring it, like actually getting like the end of your paintbrush in there and like literally stirring it around? Could be we've got some like pigment sedimentation in the bottle. Maybe an agitator in there. Try a second bottle. I don't know. That's strange, man. I don't know what to tell you. I've never had the problem. Like it is so opaque and not running for me. So I don't know what to say. I have not experienced that. I'm not doubting you. I'm certainly believing you have, but sometimes with artistic stuff like that, you can get inconsistent bottles. So maybe that's what happened. Having trouble. Okay, so Chris Velasquez wanted to know about painting smooth whites on large flat surfaces. So my number one recommendation, Chris, is go watch my How to Paint Smooth Whites video. That's number one. But number two is wet blending is your friend. You want to work in wet paint. You want to have a little bit of retardant in there, and you want to keep everything flowing smooth, and you want the paint to be spread out. FW white ink is your friend, as is your heavy body acrylic. You can use schminky, I don't know, whatever. I don't use that one. That one's more European. It's fine. They're both good. Or golden. I know Ben Comets uses the schminky one. I use golden. He's talked about this one being fine as well. Liquitex makes one as well. It's probably fine. The heavy body acrylic, as long as it's the heavy body acrylic. That and then near whites. Mix in your grays and stuff like that, and then just blend up to it in a wet blend fashion. That way you get a nice. Don't try to be thin with it. Thinning white is where it goes wrong. You want a fairly heavy coat of it. If you watch that video, you'll see how I painted my little rat man, and that'll hopefully illuminate that. On the subject, how do you get better at painting when you feel you got stuck and got no one around to paint? Posting things to the internet only goes so far. Yeah, sure. How do you get better at painting? Like when you feel you're stuck? Find someone who can give you real, judged, honest feedback. The internet is often, like in general, is often not the best place. But if you can find a community that can give you real targeted feedback, if you can get feedback from a judge, go enter painting competitions and seek the judge out and force them to give you feedback. Go like, if you really feel like you're stuck and you want to go like, and like watching the tutorials and stuff, then, sign up for a Patreon for a couple months where you can get feedback from, a top artist. Lots of top artists have Patreons where they will give you direct feedback on your work. That tends to be expensive. It's going to be like $50 for that month. But if you do it for a couple months and get some feedback, it can often help unstick that log jam. And by the way, they all expect that nobody's going to sign up for like 3 years on their $50 Patreon and keep getting feedback. Like it's a rotational thing. And I'm sure the artist is very happy to have, the support, and they're very happy then to share and help you out. And they can, they'll spend the time because you just paid them to do so. And, if it's $100 or something for 2 or 3 months of really targeted Photoshop enhanced detailed feedback from a top artist, I don't know. That seems pretty worth it to me, and they're certainly going to be friendly, but all those things are what I would recommend. What you want is to move from like general feedback from sort of the world to like targeted feedback from people who kind of know. Okay. Hey. Sorry. All right. All right, we're going to wrap it up soon because obviously my dogs are telling me it's time to go. And I went a little longer than where I was going to go, but that's okay. Chris Velasquez says, currently I'm zenithal priming, then metallic zenithal per your vid. Cool. And building whites from there. I am very confused. So you're doing white or you're doing metals? Oh, are you saying like you're doing it in metal to have the metal bits and then you're like painting white over the top? I like for areas that are non-metallic. So like you have some parts that are metal and some parts that are that. Because if that's the case, I would very much recommend doing the opposite. Like put your metal on last. Don't put your metal on first. Like that's a lot. Like GW does that a lot, where they'll prime this whole thing in metal and then paint acrylic over top. That's such a pain in the butt. If you're gonna like do your metals last, get your white on there, get your um, get your like main colors down, and then do your metals over top. That would be my strong recommendation. The Zenithal metal is when you have like an almost exclusively metal fig. So like the skeleton to a Night Titan, right? I do that like that every time because that's 99% metal other than some like tubes. Okay. All right. So many questions. All right. These are gonna we're going into lightning round, so because I don't want to leave anybody hanging. So here we go. Local hobby stores pushing Model Master paints, very thick screw top jars. Nope, that's a hard pass. I would never use anything that has a screw top. Okay. Let's see. Do you use or can you recommend a liquid mask? I don't. I don't talk about liquid masks in my masking video. I don't like them. I don't use them. There you go. That's probably like I don't even think about them. Now, I have some Green Stuff World liquid mask to give it a try. Everyone I have previously tried, I have found nothing but completely annoying. And I don't use them because Silly Putty does what I need it to do. That being said, I'll experiment with the Green Stuff World stuff and see if it works better. I have not used it yet. It could be good. Who knows? I have to ask, how do you go about collecting a Daughters of Cain army? You buy the get starting boxes because they're hero or the whatever they are, like that box that was there, if you can still find it, because it has all your heroes and 10 witch elves in it. Or you buy the Battle Force box that's coming out this Christmas, because that's actually a really awesome box that contains like the snakes and the Canary and everything you need. And anytime you're getting a cauldron, you're getting like the cauldrons come with all your heroes, because it has a Slaughter Queen and a Hag Queen and a Medusa and the chariot itself. So it's a great deal. Okay. Would the black primer you used on the night frame work on something like Stormcast? I'm painting Hollow Knights with Vallejo metal color. If it's like, here's what I'll say. Yes, if it's like 90% steel. If you're just doing like shoulder pads and a tabard, yeah, you could go that direction. But like if we're talking about like the sacrosanct chamber, I wouldn't do it. There's too much cloth there. If it's old school Stormcast where they're like 90% metal, sure. Are you going to be teaching at Nova 2019 again? Yes, I am. Okay. Plan to paint my Stormcast with orange. Any good orange reference? Do you have any tips to shade orange? Yeah, sure. Orange should go over a flesh color or an ivory or something like that for your highlights. Same rules apply for your warm highlighting. Like the warm zenithal is exactly what it is. Deep brown to rust in the low parts. I would shade it with a rusty color to a rusty brown mixed with your orange. Go into a deeper orange first, like a calamari orange or Kalahari orange, or I forget. I've made the joke so many times now, I don't even remember what the real one is from scale 75. You can also add a little bit of blue into your orange, very light amounts of blue. That will be your shade color for orange because that's actually the complementary color. Blue is the color of shadows often when you have cold light. So putting a bit of blue in will actually desaturate the color and make a perfect orange shadow. Lightning round. Any tips on dragon scales? Usually they're okay. They're one of the best things in the world to like dry brush and wash on and do successive layers. Final step is generally to get a nice sharp thin brush and do some little hashes at the edge depending on the size of the scale to make it look like that sort of dry edge. So like at the edge of the scale you get a nice sharp brush and you go like, if this is the scale, and you go like you make little hashes. That can be the extra step that really pops them out and makes them look good. Is Vallejo liquid gold still the best for gold? I really prefer Vallejo metal color just because it's easier. The liquid gold is a better sheen. It is like gold flake. It's amazing, but it's such a pain to work with. I've switched to metal color just so I don't drive myself insane. It's nearly as good as far as final sheen, but you got to do a lot of color mixing between the gold and the copper to get the exact tone you want, because the gold is very green, the copper is very red. You got to put them together in the right ratio. Hey Vince, I just traded my corn army for a bunch of dock models. You once talked about a snake list. Do you still think it's competitive? I think it will be once the witch elves get nerfed. I think snakes are competitive, yes. Nick Carroll, I mix cheap dark brown hobby store paint with PVA glue to create a soil effect to stick my grass onto bases. It looks great, but how do I stop the grass getting knocked off in gaming or transit? PVA glue mixed with water, a little bit of touches over the top, and then a spray of varnish to then lock that all in. For the average painter trying to improve, would you rather recommend a batch painting good quality or just focusing on one miniature and to paint as the best quality possible? Trick question. The answer is both. Do both. Challenge yourself on speed, quantity, time, and quality. Always be challenging yourself and do it deliberately. Don't sit down and do it accidentally. Deliberate practice is the way to get better. So yes, do all of that over time. Bases are a big problem for me for sure. Yeah, I have a couple basing videos out there where I talk about all the different stuff I use. I'll go back and look and see, like, especially like I have, I mean, obviously I have probably 20 hobby cheating videos on basing. But it is a big thing. I'll look at what I've got because I know I had like I have a basics of basing video. If you go back in hobby cheating series near the beginning, there is a basics of basing video. I'll go back and look at that too and see if there's like an advance or an update one I can do. Okay. Any product recommendation for a high gloss varnish? I just use standard Vallejo gloss varnish. Never had a problem with it. Always works fine. I know AK makes a gloss varnish that's also quite nice. Chris Velasquez, any tips for airbrushing with watercolors in general? Should I be thinning more or less than Vallejo paints? Yes, thin a lot. A lot. Like, I use water and thinner. It's one of the few times I do it. I make sure they're thoroughly mixed. I test, and then I put it in the cup. That is my recommendation. They airbrush like a dream, but you are going like 2 drops of paint to 5 drops of thinner and a drop or 2 of water. That's my ratio. Okay, so it needs to be that far apart. All right, last couple questions. What is your opinion on using wet effects like Vallejo? Oh, you mean like water effects? Yeah, sure. You mean like Vallejo transparent water that I just used on a base like 20 minutes before I started this? Yeah, it's fine. But you can also use stuff like gloss gel, which I also used. For my actual water, I use a bunch of different stuff. I use AK Interactive Puddles and Scenic Weapon makes a realistic water. If you're doing a big pour, you need a 2-part epoxy resin. Magic Water is the only one I trust. It shrinks very little. It's a perfect 2-part epoxy. If you're doing like a full pour where you need like that much distance. If we're just talking about like little water effects, then everything I mentioned is fine. Do you enjoy painting with Raphael 8404 brushes? They're fine. I've used some Raphael and Da Vinci. I like them fine. I use Winsor & Newton just because they have the exact spring I like. But sure. Favorite board game? True board game? True board game. Mice and Mystics is pretty cool. I don't know. I tend to play more card games. So like, or dice games. Like I like Warriors, stuff like that. Cards Against Humanity, all the standard stuff, you know. But I don't do a lot of it. I do it mainly like when I'm on vacation with people or something. Preferred airbrush, primer, and thinner. Stynylrez or Vallejo are both fine. Thinner, I use Vallejo thinner only. Yeah, there you go. Ta-da! All right, we're done. I know we lightning rounded there at the end, but I didn't want to leave anybody's questions hanging. I wanted to make sure we got it all. So there you go, folks. Hopefully that helped. I hope some of that was instructive. If you have more questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. I will answer them in the comments, so you can always feel free to do that. But I very much appreciate you watching. I hope this is useful. Like I said, we will do this every month. As we were sitting here talking, the newest hobby cheating video went up. Like I said, on masking, I do not mention liquid mask because I don't like it. I probably should have mentioned that I don't like it, but I just left it to the side. And there's a new video, of course, every week. We do this once a month. You know, there might come a world where I do this twice a month, but for now it's once a month, and that's the schedule I can support. But as always, I very much appreciate you watching this. I hope it helped. As always, thank you very much. I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next time.